Hi, this is Dave Douglas. You're listening to the music of Ingrid Jensen on the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. I'll be talking to Ingrid Jensen today and asking her about her music and her trumpet playing and life, and we have a good conversation. Hope you enjoy it. You can get all of the podcasts that we've recorded over the last few years at greenleafmusic.com. There's also plenty of other good things there. There's exclusive subscription content and new recordings all the time. You can also email me, podcast@greenleafmusic.com, with suggestions and questions. Thanks, as always, for your feedback. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Ingrid Jensen, the great trumpeter and composer. Thank you. Ingrid Jensen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Some beautiful playing.
Oh, thank you.
So that's Center Song. It's your composition. It's on a Steve Tressler record. My dog just barked. And he named the album after your song.
Yeah.
So who else is on that?
Don Clement, bunch of Seattle cats. I can pull up all of their names. Don Clement, great piano player. I don't know if you know
We'll make
her.
sure to include everything in the web posting for this episode.
Yeah. That was a project I did probably 4 or 5 years ago. And that tune has evolved a lot with my band since then. I just realized listening back to that. But the reason I really wanted to play that is to connect this East Coast lifestyle I have now to my roots on the West Coast, which was very much about nature and what I'm seeing out your window here. Trees, not a lot of activity, rain. But
the
centering.
Pacific Northwest, that's
The Pacific Northwest, that vibe of a little slower than New York City.
Home for you.
Home.
And maybe a key to, the openness and the meditative quality of a song like that, would you say?
I would say it applies, yeah. And full circle back is more of, how to get in that headspace within all the chaos while living in a crazy place like New York and doing, trying to keep up with our lifestyles, which are so full and so hectic. And then on top of that, you throw all this technology into the picture. Being from the old LP cassette era, all of a sudden there's like just so much music around and so much potential distraction. And centering for me in the music comes from sometimes just playing drones and getting into that sound of slowness and that feeling of space.
I remember one time years ago, gosh, I hesitate to even think about how long ago it was, but we got together and practiced together once.
That was when I lived in Brooklyn.
Yeah, and I think I still was in Brooklyn then too. And we did a warm-up together that you had that was all based on drones.
Really?
And long, slow chordal playing.
That's
and
the
just
very beginnings of it.
Major triads. What do you mean, the very beginnings of it?
Because that was even before I even got my Tanpura drone box and started to really apply my hearing, my listening and daily ear training hearing concepts to that element. I think I maybe got that Walter White drone CD or something. Remember Walter White?
Yes.
Great trumpet player.
Yeah, and he had a whole technique built on drones.
Yeah, and that really got me into just a deeper awareness of intervals while playing our little intervallic hunk of metal that we work with.
Yeah, it ain't easy. But, the flow, the sense of ease with which you play, I would bet it comes from that practice that you obviously been honing in on that for many years.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it works really well with, especially students, I find these days. It really helps them to slow down their overall awareness of where they're going with their ideas in a way where they can actually start to formulate melodies. And that's what I'm loving about it more than ever.
And is this specifically for trumpet and brass, or do you mean this for any instrument?
Any instrument, really. Yeah, I've even
so it
had drummers
starts-
work on it, so they're really listening and hearing.
Starts from a drone, and then are there specific ways in?
The first note you hear against it, the most honest place you can begin from, and then taking it from there.
So not necessarily the root or the fifth, and what about, does it have to be long notes?
Can be free playing over top of it. Eventually,
But it's
back
also
to the
about,
thing we talked about with triads, though. Eventually going back
Yeah.
to a triad and realizing the tendencies of each person's ears and their instrument in relation to that sound. Some people are sharp when they put down that B. Some people are flat. Some people are starting with smaller sound, and then they can start to develop it more. So in my own case, I realized that I had, my own pitch tendencies against certain notes, and the more I got inside those intervals, the more that flow seems to happen.
yeah, and I suppose it helps you hear what you want to hear when you're in the actual music.
Yeah,
The
and
awareness
more.
of how each pitch falls into place. That's deep. And I would just ask, in addition, you as a composer, you as a, I mean, you're obviously in a lot of different contexts in your musical life, and I wonder if you would say that this also informs your world. So
Yes.
you're shaking your head, and it's a podcast, so nobody can see
Nobody can
that,
see me
so
shaking my head, but yes, yes, yes.
So I guess I would have to say then, how central is the trumpet to this slowness and drone? And is that what led you to a larger view using those drones in your musical insight?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, in a weird way, it leads me, once I feel like I'm starting to hear counterpoint against the one note that may be droning, maybe it's a B pedal, and I'm starting to hear lines and ideas against it, it tends to lead me to the piano when I start writing something.
Wow.
Or I'll start writing a line against it, or the possibilities open up. If I put some kind of pulse on with the metronome, I can maybe start to hear other placements for those ideas, rhythmic placement, where those ideas may begin, what the feel of a tune might be. In the case of this tune that we're opening with, that was all that it was about, was just playing some melodies against a root. But
Yeah.
then really finally, it took a little while for me to edit it to the point where it was really clear about what the melody is. And it was not just, a simple modal change, but each time I changed the mode slightly of each chord, I was able to feel that energy I was looking for. And that's what I'm looking for when I start to, or looking to listen for when I start playing against those sounds, or
And
with
when you
those
start
sounds.
composing.
Yeah,
that's what
yeah,
you-
it kind
yeah.
of gets me in the music right away. The feeling of live playing and sort of through composed positioning of a placement, rather than I'm writing an AABA tune or something like that. I can do that as well with that
Sure,
material.
right.
It could evolve into that.
Yeah, and I was going to point out that obviously the final result of your composing that starts this way is not necessarily something that has a drone.
No.
Right.
No.
I just want to ask one more question, but I want to hear a different tune where this is also at play in a different way. But I can't help asking, since we were both students and friends of Laurie Frink, how does this warming up and tuning in with a drone relate to the lessons that you got from Laurie, the great trumpet
The great
teacher?
late Laurie. I mean, she saved my career twice. And the first time was just because I couldn't play the trumpet and was struggling and frustrated. And I did everything she told me to do. And it really worked.
She did that for me once by telephone. But go ahead.
She's amazing. And her legacy lives on for all of us. But the second time was when I had this Bell's palsy situation, which is something that I don't recommend any trumpet player or brass player
darn
ever
it.
have to
I
experience.
was going to sign up for that.
Yeah, don't do it. It's
Okay.
not worth it. But it was, like in many struggles in life, you learn more about yourself and what you can do to help others through treating those injuries, hopefully.
Yeah.
So in my case, I started applying the stuff that Lori gave me to sound, because I felt that even with just doing what she told me to do, the 6 notes, this buzzing thing we do, buzzing on the lips, buzzing on the mouthpiece, buzzing on the blowing through the horn, those 6 notes.
You do the 6 notes in those 3 different versions? Buzzing with the
Yes.
lips, buzzing on the mouthpiece, and on the horn.
But it all depends on what note I'm hearing
I see.
first. And so I start that, and then I'll put a drone on and play over top of that. Do those 6 notes with a drone. So
but
maybe F, maybe B flat, maybe G. Doesn't matter.
Okay. So for most people wouldn't, well, trumpet players would know, but the original 6 notes exercise, composed by Carmine Caruso,
Yes.
starts on a concert F.
Right.
And for the trumpet, it's the G. That's the second line of the treble clef. And I've never heard anybody start it on a different note.
Yeah.
And so that's...
Sometimes
and
I
is that
start it
something
on
that
E
Lori
flat.
had you do?
Not exactly, but I told her
you've-
about it. I confessed. I said,
Yeah.
Laura, I have a confession. I'm not doing
Yeah.
it exactly the way you told me. She's like, that's great. You should do that.
Wow.
I said, some days I feel like my chops want to start on a different note. So I let them stop. I let them start there. And then I eventually hone in on the actual basics of that exercise. But I wouldn't start it like on a double high C or a pedal F, but somewhere within that same register.
Well, the operative principle being the note that feels most comfortable to start the day with, so you're not forcing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then if I put a drone on and it happens to be the flat 9 against that drone or something like that, then it's like, wow, I guess I really am honestly hearing that. That's where my air is lining up with my face. So let's start there and
Yeah. Yeah.
and start the day without having to push my chops to start somewhere else. So that's kind of what got me into that. Was like, well, just start a little lower. Or sometimes the note comes out a bit higher.
Let's listen to Hope's Trail. So this is another piece of yours from a record that you made with your sister Christine Jensen,
And the great
Infinitude,
Ben Monder on guitar.
and Ben Monder on guitar. So we'll hear some of this Hope's Trail. That's Hope's Trail.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah, we got to come back to this because Ingrid, I was going to ask you, my first question about that track was what mute you were using. It sounds like a cup mute, but it's a gorgeous sounding cup mute. And then you pulled out some lip balm that you say is from Sweden, and you started telling me this story about the Swedish military uses this lip balm.
And you can take it out with you in the fields or the wilds, and if you run out of olive oil while you want to cook your eggs for breakfast, you can use the hood salva.
Cook with your lip balm.
You can cook with your lip balm. Well, I'm not sure. These are new versions. They're different colors. They might have flavors in them.
Hood salva.
But the original hood salva is military prescribed. It was so cheap, too. You go to the apothec and the apothec, and it's like $2.
That is so cool. All right, I'm going to have to get some of that.
You gotta get some.
So
Sweden
somebody's probably
Apotheke.
selling it online.
They're
Hood
everywhere
salva.
now.
Yeah. Okay, so is it a cup mute?
It is a cup mute.
Good.
It's a lovely cup mute that I really like mutes. I like my Harman and I like my cup.
Yeah.
And I've had them kind of worked on specifically. Roberto at Roberto's Woodwinds in New York
What does he
City,
do to
the
them?
saxophone guy. He
Yeah.
he custom fits them to my bell.
Roberto,
my
what's the name?
Monette.
It's Woodwind.
Brass, what was it called?
Well, it's located where Michiko Rehearsal Studio is on 48th Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's so good
Roberto,
with all that. And I think that has it makes it even better because it was falling out before, so it must be better.
So he's working with the cork?
Yeah, he uses that special cork for saxophone cork. And so he sometimes on my Harmon mute, he does it like a leather-based cork. It's amazing.
But nothing to do with opening up the actual mute itself.
No, actually to make it tighter,
tighter.
And suck into the bell more.
Do you ever use a mute on the flugelhorn? I know you play flugel.
I don't play flugel anymore.
don't?
My flugel is in the MIM Museum. It's been there for 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't miss it. I don't
didn't
need
know.
it. I have my Monette that has this mouthpiece that turns into a flugel. It's a flumpet. It changes it to sound more like Art Farmer's flumpet, which is a mix of, it's a cross-pollination of instruments.
Yeah.
A rogue breed of flumpet and trumpet and flugel.
Well, John Philip Sousa wouldn't have gone for that, or Herbert Clark, but
No.
Would you count Art Farmer as a big influence for you?
Yeah, Art and I were very good friends when I lived in Austria back in the day. And I even played on his flumpet, which was interesting, but, it was missing that brilliance of the trumpet, which I like to have too.
Oh, so you find that the Monette that you have now,
Yeah,
yeah,
it has all that.
really interesting. So the flumpet you found, I found that when I switched to cornet. I loved it, but there were just certain trumpety forward march kind of things that you couldn't do.
Yeah, that soaring over top with that big, brilliant sound is also in there too.
Interesting.
But the flugel thing is so funny. Everybody thinks I still play flugel, but I fool them with those darker setups. Fooling the flumpets.
What about musical influence with Art Farmer?
Huge. I mean, that first Art Farmer Jim Hall record that was must have come out in the 80s, right? That record blew my mind. It was one of my first records that I bought at a record store as my young 15, 16-year-old jazz freak that I was. And
In the Pacific Northwest, in Nanaimo.
In Nanaimo.
Wow.
Excellent pronunciation, by the way.
I heard it from you earlier today. I will not.
Yeah. He was another sound I just felt like I identified with. And whenever I met him throughout the rest of my life, he was always kind of one of my mentors who made me sit in and all that stuff.
Wow, very cool. Well, he was such a great person, right?
Yeah.
Great man. I mean, I was around him, but very, very briefly.
Very studied, too. He was shedding. He was like shedding Jerry Bergonzi book when he was in his 70s. Wow. Just always...
Anybody else that you would count as it's I guess on any instrument people talk about influences, but I think on the trumpet everybody's sound is so unique. But we all have our heroes and our particular people that when we were younger we really emulated. Is there anyone that you would put in that category for you?
I mean, I went from hat to hat. I really did absorb myself into certain trumpet players. Never always one at a time. Never sort of just, one day I like Freddie, one day I like Woody. I was listening to a lot of characters in the music, but I would say the one that had the longest lasting impact on me was probably Clark Terry. Mostly because his sound was so beautiful and his way of phrasing and the feel and his personality and everything. As much as I was obsessed with Miles, absolutely obsessed with Miles. Yeah. But there was something about Clark Terry that I always seemed to find an affinity to as far as making me want to be better on the trumpet.
Well, a lot of people, myself included, hear the influence of Clark Terry in Miles Davis's playing.
Well, yeah. Who was it? Slide Hampton was backstage one time. I was fortunate to be on a little concert with these guys, and Slide was like, "Clark, you know it. There'd be no Miles without you. You know it." And Clark's like, "Oh, come on." Because Miles got everything from you as far as that doodle-tonguing thing and all that phrasing. And it was an interesting fly-on-the-wall moment when I was like, wow, yeah.
Well, it was also the tone. But one interesting thing is that Clark had such a distinctive vibrato in his tone, and that's the one thing that Miles sort of excised from his playing. Early on, you hear
Yeah.
it, but at a certain point, he decided to go a different direction, and that was the thing maybe that set him apart
Yeah.
from everybody.
Yeah.
Interesting. So were you around Clark?
I was.
very
I was
much?
very fortunate to be around him. He was the reason I got a
wonderful.
record deal and with Enja, and he was a real. He pushed me. He was my, like the mentor that every kid dreams of having. Someone who, no matter what the gig is, you have to sit in on it, and that's how he was.
Was
to
this
me.
in Europe when you were living in Europe?
It was,
or-
yeah. Our relationship started in New York when I sat in with him at the Vanguard.
Wow, that takes some guts.
Many years ago.
What year would that have been, can I ask?
I just found the picture of it. Somebody took a Polaroid, and I don't know what the hell I was wearing. I did not look cool. But I do remember being extremely nervous, and I think it was 1992,
Oh, okay.
maybe 92 or 93. I was visiting New York. No, it was the first time. It was my first time living there. That's what it was. It was
But
92.
sitting in at the Vanguard was no easy thing to just
No, it was
That
it
took
was
a lot
intense.
of guts.
I didn't want to. It was actually Clark's goddaughter who made me sit in.
What's her name?
Charlotta. She was Ernie Wilkins' daughter.
Okay.
So Ernie Wilkins and Clark were super tight. And so I moved, when I lived in Denmark, which I moved to Denmark after I finished Berkeley, because I didn't want to go home to Nanaimo and be a waitress. I wanted to transcribe Dexter Gordon and Woody Shaw. So I took my cassettes and I moved to my aunt's house in Copenhagen and lived in this little room looking out over the neighborhoods of Copenhagen, and had a bike and went out to jam sessions and transcribed every day and shedded. And then I would hang out at this record store called Steve's Records, and that's where I met Ernie. And Ernie was living in Copenhagen, and he had this daughter who lived in New York, and blah, blah, blah. He said, you tell Clark, you take Ingrid down to the Vanguard, and you tell Clark he has to let her sit in.
Wow.
So that's
Great.
kind of how that happened, because I really didn't want to. I was just like, and he goes, where's your trumpet? And I was like, oh, it's actually across town. Well, go get it. It was
Good for
over
him.
in the East
And you
Village,
did.
and I went and got in a cab, went and got
Great.
my horn, ran back, and that's how
for
the
you.
Polaroid happened.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I had this crazy Swiss roommate who took a Polaroid every day, and so he took a picture of me that night.
But sometimes just a single episode like that can last a lifetime and stay with you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about Woody Shaw because it's an influence that I hear in your playing, and I mean that in a good way.
Thank you.
It's not an easy kind of playing to adapt to, let's say.
It's funny, Dave, because I feel like he's the one guy, when I look through my transcription books, because I used to write out a lot of my solos just to analyze them. There's one guy I would write maybe 6 bars, and then I'd stop because it felt too sacred. It's like, I don't want to know what this is. So I played along with those recordings, and I tried to let my ears follow that way of the feeling of his playing. But I never really got into the actual, like, learning the licks. But I think that, weirdly enough, I think my studies with George Garzone helped me to connect the dots there, because he talks about chromaticism and triadic harmony and linking those ideas up with more angular intervals. And it was at that time, I think it just was sort of like, I never really consciously thought about how to play that feeling of Woody. It wasn't something I was going after, but I think that I was sort of curious about finding those other angles within the changes. And the Garzone's way of teaching just opened up a lot of pathways to access that. Does that make sense? I think.
Yeah, it does. And I think what you're saying about Woody Shaw is really interesting because, I felt the same way when I was deeply, deeply studying his music, that so much of it was just a point of view. It wasn't so much the lines themselves, as brilliant as they are.
Yeah.
It was coming from a very unusual perspective. And earlier this season, when I got to talk to Charles Tolliver about it, who they were close at the time, and they came up at the same time, and they were subject to the same pressures and atmosphere of
must
the
have been
music
hard,
and the
yeah.
business and every America, and
Yeah.
but it's felt the same,
Mm-hmm.
that it was an attitude and not so much.
And
Well, I guess
and
it becomes technical.
and his compositions too also give you such an insight into that richness of harmony and an understanding of melody and how to move things in a different way, in a more unique kind
I've
of.
felt that about Kenny Wheeler too.
For
I'm
sure.
sure he's somebody that you resonated with.
For sure. Same thing.
Later on, we'll hear your collaboration with Kenny Wheeler. But first, I was going to play this track called At Sea, which I believe is from your own record
Yes.
called At Sea.
Which somehow I didn't bring. That's easy to get to you, though.
Everybody's going to hear it anyway,
Yeah,
because I
but I
have the
wanted to
track
get you
right
that.
here.
Okay.
Here it is, At Sea. So that's from At Sea, your album, and the name of the tune is At Sea, and it's Jeff Keezer on piano, Matt Clohessy on bass,
John Week on drums.
John Week on drums, who even close to you.
My husband. It's kind of a family band, and that was a sketch. That was like 3 bars of music I gave him, and there wasn't even a meter on it. I just said, John's like, well, what's it in? What's the meter? I said, I don't know yet. Let's just start playing. When I give you a pulse, we go from there. And that little piece turned into kind of a sextet chart with some solis and lines. And now, full circle, it's a beautiful big band piece that Fred Sturm, the late Fred Sturm, arranged for me towards the end of his life.
Oh, I'll look forward to hearing that.
Beautiful. Well, we're going to play it on Thursday at the New School with the New School Orchestra.
We'll leave that,
You
the
can leave
name
that
of that
out.
Thursday. Well, I will look forward to hearing it live, but this podcast, unfortunately, will probably be released after that.
Right.
So in case you're listening to this and you're curious, you missed it.
But it just turned into a full through composed piece from just this sketch.
Great.
So it was a really good experience for me to find more material off of just that in one intro. I mean, there's 3 or 4 solo sections.
Like I was something that I would bring up in a lot of the music that we're hearing, and is your skill in collaboration. Working with other artists, and like having this sketch and having artists in your band, but then having someone like Fred Sturm be able to take that and turn it into a lengthy through composed thing.
Yeah.
You've done a lot of collaborate. You collaborate with your sister.
Yep, we do. A lot of her music as well is informed by our playing it together in small group situations. So she's writing some amazing big band music these days. She's really coming up with some
This
stuff.
is Christine Jensen, in case you don't know.
Christine Jensen
Who's based in
Montreal. She's teaching at McGill, and she's quite involved in the composition department there. And so a lot of the stuff we end up doing live becomes part of our music that we end up expanding for larger ensembles. There's other charts I'm working on as well that have gone from just tiny little sketches that are now clearly going to be orchestrated for big band. But her music the same way we play. We play and we play. That's what we do. We start playing and we just play.
That's good.
So there's that freedom in there that is it's very luxurious.
And your husband, John, the drummer, is quite often a part of it, too.
He is, and he's another one of these people in the band. We don't speak much about what we're going to do. We just start playing, and we find things together. If there's a specific groove or a specific section that needs to have a feel that goes with the composition, there's that discussed, but it almost never needs to be discussed because we're always together and coming up with this stuff in a real family kind of vibe.
Wow.
That's a lot of trust and a lot of every gig is different because of it too, which is really great.
And also the willingness to play everybody's pieces is a big part of that, I think. Yeah. On this latest, I guess it's the most recent release, Infinitude.
Yeah.
There's a piece where you play with Kenny Wheeler.
No, it's not with Kenny. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
no,
not
it's
with
not.
Kenny. It's for Kenny.
It's for Kenny. Yeah.
Oh.
No, I wish it was with Kenny.
Well, now I want to hear it even more.
No, it's his tune, old time. But no, I never got to record that with him.
So who is on this?
That's
Ben
the one with
Monder
Ben
is on
Monder, Christine, and me, and Fraser Hollins.
Oh, nice.
And John. Yeah, that's a British label.
Did you play with Kenny
I
Wheeler
did.
ever?
Yeah.
Quite a bit, I'd imagine, right?
A few times. When I lived in Europe, we did some big band stuff together, and then I was with him at Banff in the 90s. And
That was before I got there.
That was
and
before
when
you
Dave
got there,
Holland was
yeah.
running it. Yeah.
Except Dave didn't show up that summer. It was a tough summer. It was just Kenny was basically running the camp because there was some fallout with the whole administration. And
I heard some inspiring stories about his time at Banff, that he would write a new piece for the brass players every morning.
Yep.
And you guys would read it.
Yeah, he would come in with things. If there were 3 trumpets in the class, it was a 3-part reharm or 3-part version of Kayak or something like that. One of his tunes. He'd either arrange something or he'd bring in a new tune. Yeah, it was amazing. And I have a picture we just found at the big band where he was playing lead. There's a recording of it too. He was playing his music and he played lead, and I was somewhere on fourth trumpet, just shaking,
Well,
trembling with fear and awe.
But he had such a deceptive sound.
Yeah.
He could sound very vulnerable, and then he could turn around and play the highest note you ever heard.
Him on lead trumpet, his own music was something else. I don't think he'd done it before, so he was just like, "Oh, this is rather lovely." I'm like, "Yeah, you're telling me."
Yeah, what a funny
really
guy
amazing.
too. He told me I was at his house, and he said, "Well, this is the piano where I write all my music." It was just a little rinky-dink upright piano.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, what do what's your process?" He goes, "Oh, I get some tea in the morning, and then I come in and I just play until something comes." And I'm like, "Well, what if nothing comes?" And he says, "Well, then I'm just in here all day."
Wow. Yeah, somebody put out a paper with his description of that. It's like, hey, maybe you have an argument with my wife, go back to the piano.
Right.
Maybe I'll write something angry.
But I think also in terms of his playing, it's been pointed out, and I've gotten to know Nick Smart quite well, who's at the Royal Academy.
We were just there. We did a lovely clinic with this band there.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and Nick's been a great supporter of Kenny's legacy and
Yes.
his music, and of course knew him very well and played with him for years. But the observation that so much of Kenny's improvisations skirted our normal understanding of the right notes to go over the right chords. Mm-hmm. That he played from melodic shapes, sometimes with a pentatonic overlay, but sometimes more just from a folk music sensibility, and irrespective of whatever the underlying chords were, even if he wrote them, he would just play what he was hearing in the moment.
Like an emotion, just blasting out of him sometimes.
Yeah. So your recording of Old Time, how much would you say you were thinking about Kenny in doing this? And you can say not at all.
Oh, no, entirely, because I would say this version of Old Time is a real homage to that spirit of the band on Double W, where there's just this intensity of collective spirit. There's not really any one solo on this particular version either. We just play very collectively, and it's a 2-chord romp regardless, but there's still, it's still a tune. And I feel like this particular moment when we all played it together, we were all thinking of maybe not Kenny specifically, but definitely the spirit of that band in the 70s.
So this is Old Time. Old Time. That is beautiful. We talked about collaboration. We talked about trumpet language. We talked about your warming up aesthetic, which I guess I realize is a lot more than warming up, and actually like a whole life practice, and that feeds into your composing and into everything. And, we haven't mentioned that you're also a mother, which is wonderful. And I think that it's often unremarked with artists how much things that happen in life are a part of what we do. And I would imagine that having a daughter probably has transformed you quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Anything in particular you want to say about that?
Well, first of all, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
The fact that I was able to have such an incredible opportunity to make music the way I get to make music, playing original music and being in a scene with people who, for the most part, I would say 99.9% want me to be on stage with them and want to lift me up and want to have my voice in their music as well is a true honor and privilege and time-consuming situation as well, which is what made me think I didn't know if I would ever really have a child because this is taking so long to get good at. This trumpet thing, this
being a mother?
music
Oh, the
thing.
trumpet,
No,
yeah.
the mother thing I'll never be good at, but I'm going to try. I'm giving it all I have.
The trumpet thing also,
It's
just remains just as demanding and maybe more so.
Yeah, except now that I feel, and I'm a mother, I actually hardly practice, and I feel like I play better than ever. Like I don't do the things I used to have to do to get to where I am now, but I'm glad I did all of them because had I not, I wouldn't know what I know today, which is, I don't know, hopefully a well-programmed, functional position with the instrument is what makes it easier to be who I am today. And then also having been around people like Maggie Olin, who I love to talk about because she's one of my oldest friends, and she has 3 kids. She did
and
the
we're
mother
going to hear
thing.
some of the music in a moment, some of your collaboration with her.
And had I not had this wonderful relationship with her and seen how possible it is to do these things, I don't know if I would have gone for this
Interesting.
this whole new part of my life, which is so. I told my daughter this morning. I said, I'm so excited in the morning when I get up and you're here and I'm here with you. This is
How old
so
is she now?
fun. She's 6.
Wow.
And we went out in the
Great
snow
age.
and we made a really goofy snowman, mini snowman. I'll show you the picture later. And it's amazing too. And she's very into the music, which is exciting as well. She was next to my drone in my belly, and I really am convinced that affected her pitch because she doesn't scoop when she sings. She just sings a note straight. But she's also, I include her in as much as I can when it comes to my life, and it's really fun.
Well, you had a long and wonderful education in the music. Coming from Nanaimo, of course, there was arts in the schools. Like me, public school probably was where you first started playing an instrument. And, we're all hoping that doesn't go away. But I also feel like in talking about life and education and the music and our society, the elephant in the room is what's happening in America right now.
What a mess.
And I'm talking specifically about the Me Too movement and women talking more openly about something that's just always been there. And I wonder if more in the jazz world than in other walks of life, or if it's just the same everywhere. I really don't know. But you don't have to say anything about this topic unless you want to, but I'm certainly all ears if you...
Well, it's a crucial thing to discuss these days so that the next generation and the younger generation, the people who are listening to this in their 20s, teens, they understand that is just the bad old school that got away with it for too long on every level, in politics, in music, in jazz specifically, because if you look at the majority of the band leaders and the majority of the teachers, they're male. That imbalance in itself is we know now not very healthy, it leads to a lot of a larger lack of inclusion than the opposite, which is really scary, because then people get power and they start to manipulate others around them with that power. And I'm seeing it with some of my younger students at the new school, and I can't believe that they're still going through these things that should be over. We should be past this now. But it seems like there's a little bit more house cleaning that has to happen first.
And maybe more openness to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Whereas someone, put yourself in that position when you were their age, maybe it was a lot less easy to bring it up and say, hey, this is not okay.
Well, even the parents and the teachers wouldn't believe you if you said, oh, my teachers did this to me. And they'd be like, yeah, right, just get over it, kid. You know?
Did you have that experience?
I personally didn't have that experience, but I did see that happening around me with band directors. There were a couple band directors in our town who, really abused their situation of power and their kind of savvy jazziness and seduction that came with the music, and they really took advantage of some students. And weirdly enough, I look back at that time for me, not weirdly, sadly, I have to look at that as my training. That was my training on like, wow, this is going down. Doesn't happen to me, thankfully, but now I have to have that as always on my radar when someone is being nice to me or asking me to do a gig with them or blah, blah, blah. So I think that also full circle, Dave, is why I play with these bands that are, I look at the picture, I'm like, oh, there's my sister and my husband and my oldest friend from Berkeley, who I just trust with all my heart. And there's a reason that those bands evolved too, is because of that absolute wonderful feeling of trust you can have when you're with good people versus trying to get into a scene that is maybe a little less healthy and full of people that maybe aren't totally in your corner as far as being a white girl that plays good. It maybe is kind of makes them uncomfortable, or they have to behave in a different way because they're threatened by what it is you're bringing to the table.
Is that a scene that you feel like you've left in order to create this beautiful family of players?
I think it's just organically happened, really, on its own. It's manifested itself in a way where I just realized, why am I beating my head against the wall trying to play with people who are not even going to hire me anyways?
But does that still happen sometimes?
Not to me, no. I guess I have manifested or put myself in a situation where I'm more a leader than ever. Or if I'm working with people in a side woman situation, it's
side person,
side human. It's positive.
It seemed positive when I heard you in the Festival of New Trumpet Music. I think Marquise Hill was the project leader, and he invited you in.
Yeah, we did that twice.
Was it Keon Harold and Maurice Brown and
Brown,
Josh Evans?
Right.
Was it Billy
Buss, yeah.
And it was such a beautiful thing. You had Kendall Moore wrote a piece that was for all the trumpets and the rhythm section, and it was just such a beautiful collaboration.
It was.
Everyone's voice was heard. You sounded wonderful.
Thank
there
you.
didn't seem to be any contentious vibe at all, and that's I think the future that we're all trying to create through this music. Right?
As long as
people can
as
work
long
together.
As people are still the one thing I fear, Dave, in all this is that everyone becomes so politically polite that we lose that fire, and that as women, all the women coming out against all these things, that these men also are not going to go, oh wow, I have to be really careful how I behaved now, and question themselves, and then maybe not. If they need to question themselves, they should. That's clear. But if it's about being tough or being aggressive in the music, I hope that element is not lost, because that is still a big part of it. That's a big part of what I love of this music, is that fire and that like the angst that's in there is there for a reason.
Well, I know more macho women than I know macho men. Ornette had a tune called Macho Woman years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I always felt like maybe that's what he meant. I don't know, but I hear what you're saying. I appreciate it. And earlier this year, I got a chance to meet a close friend of yours who I actually didn't know was a close friend of yours until I was there in Sweden, in Malmö, at the conservatory, Maggie Olin. And so we're going to go out with the collaboration that the two of you did.
This is a band called David's Angels, and it's 3 girls and David on bass.
Poor David.
He's the engineer. And,
I hope he still has that fire.
He has that fire. He's so zen. He engineered the record, and we did it in his studio. And he went and hit record, and then we just did tunes. And he's a really wonderful guy. And this band it's kind of like my indie rock sort of foray that I get to do my electronica on. And there's not a lot of music as far as chords and things.
When you say your electronics, you have like pedals and stuff, or
pedals
what are you
and
doing?
Loops and wah-wahs and distortion.
Ableton Live, or
no, just guitar pedals.
And you have a clip-on microphone that goes into the pedals, or?
Yeah, I run through a mic and I use a volume pedal, and I have a good old vintage wah, and it's a fusion of between my acoustic sound and the electronic sound.
Great.
Everything that's happening is happening live.
Is that happening on this track that we're
It
going to hear?
is. Yeah, there's some funny, like, banging the mute against the mic sounds and getting some weird distorted things going on.
Nothing to confound an engineer like banging the mute against the mic.
Why is she hitting her microphone?
But I guess David couldn't run back into the control room to...
No, he loved it. He was like, let me turn that up. In fact, I think we did some extra tracks of me just doing that sound. They're Swedes. They're so open. They're so non-judgmental, yet so completely deep and creative and well-educated. And shall I go on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or we could listen to this tune.
Listen to this tune.
It's called Traces. I guess it's Maggie Olin's composition.
And Sophie Norling is a singer, and it's her lyrics. Yeah, they've collaborated a lot on this music.
Wow, that's wonderful.
It's
well,
really
Ingrid,
cool
thank you
band.
so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me over. This is a thrill.
It's been a great conversation. I learned a lot. I have a lot more questions than I would ask, but I think I'm going to let you get back to practicing and being a mom and everything. You guys are building a jazz club in Ossining, New York?
No, it's a brewery. It's a brewery, but it's not a jazz club. It's going to be but it is going to be a music and art space with only original music, apparently.
In Ossining?
Yeah.
Great.
That's what they're. I don't know if that's the one thing I think is the gist of it. Is not like no cover bands and.
Does it have a name yet?
Sing Sing Kill Brewery.
Sing Sing Kill
Brewery.
Okay. For those who don't know, Sing Sing Penitentiary is in the town of Ossining, New York, and it's
used
still
to be
there.
called Sing Sing. They changed the name from Sing Sing to Ossining because they didn't want it to be the same as the prison. And now they're talking about changing it back.
Really?
Yeah. Don't ask me why.
Tortured history.
Yeah, it's a little intense, but it's going to be a real social meeting place. People are going to come there, and
I'll go there.
It's what we need in that town.
Great.
And it's across from the police station, so if you drink too much, you can just go over there and do a little breathalyzer test.
Sleep it off.
They'll be like, nope, can't drive yet.
Yeah.
Go back in there.
All right. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay.